Americans are now starting to have the big national conversation we need to have about gun safety in this country. For Republican politicians, not so much.
A note here this morning, we reached out to all 31 pro-gun rights senators in the new Congress to invite them on the program to share their views on this subject this morning. We had no takers.
I think I should note that we tried to get a Republican from the Judiciary Committee, but all of the members were either unavailable or said no.
As for the few Republicans who did want to talk, they offered bizarre ideas, like the solution to gun violence is more guns.
I wish to God she had had an M4 in her office locked up, so when she heard gunfire, she pulls it out, and she didn't have to lunge heroically with nothing in her hands, but she takes him out, takes his head off before he can kill those precious kids.
And I'm not so sure, and I'm sure I'll get mail from this, I'm not so sure I wouldn't want one person in a school armed, ready for this kind of thing.
Arming teachers, is that really where we are in this country? But in Michigan, Republicans are on the verge of exactly that. The Republican governor, Rick Snyder, is debating whether to sign a new bill that would allow concealed weapons in churches and schools. GOP lawmakers passed the bill last week late at night in a lame duck session, literally just hours before the tragedy at Sandy Hook. Now Snyder says he'll give the bill, quote, extra consideration. He says, quote, what that legislation says will be looked at through the lens of all that's happened. The governor seems to understand that everything is different. What his right-wing legislator rammed through may not be acceptable anymore. But is the rest of the GOP ready to listen? Joining me now is Michigan State Representative Brandon Dillon, the Democrat who spoke out forcefully against this new bill, and Michelle Carter, Washington correspondent for the Daily Beast. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks, Raf.
Thank you.
Representative Dillon, does Governor Snyder think we need more guns in schools after what happened in Connecticut?
Well, I certainly hope not. Up until this tragedy in Connecticut, and I want to express my deepest sympathies to all the families and victims of that. Governor Snyder was all set to sign this bill. He had negotiated with Republicans in the legislature to sign a bill that passed the legislature, as you said, in the wee hours of the night on Thursday night that would allow guns in schools, churches, and daycare centers. I hope that the governor listens to common sense here and takes this tragedy to heart and vetoes this bill. Michelle,
a spokesman for the coalition in Michigan, the Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners, says if you have pistol-free zones, they are actually mass murderer empowerment zones.
You know, that would be laughable if it weren't so sad. I mean, you can say that this is a bizarre approach and bizarre reasoning, but it's not new. I can't think of a time when we haven't had this kind of response in the wake of one of these tragedies. You always have somebody pushing back saying, well, if only someone in that area had been armed, we could have ended this faster and there wouldn't have been so many casualties. But that just seems about as counterintuitive as you could look for in terms of actually addressing the issue.
Now, that not only do you have that, Representative Dillon, you look at the national group supporting guns in the schools. Larry Pratt, the executive director of Gun Owners of America, actually said gun control supporters have the blood of little children on their hands. This tragedy underscores the urgency of getting rid of gun bans in school zones. If we didn't have a gun ban in the school zone in Newtown, I mean, that would have stopped what this man did. I mean, where's the logic in any of this?
Well, there is no logic. It's a desperate attempt to try to deflect responsibility for this tragedy squarely where it belongs. And you know, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who believes that the solution to these tragedies that we've seen in our schools over the last few years is to put more guns in schools. I heard that argument driving over here to the studio on some conservative radio shows, and it's frankly preposterous to believe that children are going to be safer in their schools if we allow everybody to carry guns into them.
Now, Michelle, Mike Huckabee made a statement about, well, let me play for you the statement that he made about God and the violence in the schools. Listen to Mr. Huckabee.
We ask why there's violence in our schools, but we've systematically removed God from our schools. Should we be so surprised that schools would become a place of carnage because we've made it a place where we don't want to talk about eternity, life, what responsibility means, accountability?
Now, I'm a preacher just like Huckabee, and I believe in God and prayer. But isn't this a smokescreen to the issue of guns and violence? This was not a school issue. This man didn't attend the school. This was a gun issue and possibly a mental health issue, Michelle.
Anytime you have a politician, or in this case an ex-politician, bring God and the wrath of God or how we've mistreated God into the discussion, it is a last desperate and utterly disgusting attempt to skirt the issues at hand. You know, this is, you know, we used to talk about Jerry Falwell would get up on his high horse and talk about how God was letting something happen because we'd removed him from our society. Anytime that happens, it is a coward's way out and absolutely reprehensible in this case.
And I might add that most of all of those that participated in that service last night, clearly the problem is not the belief in God. The problem is how we protect God's children. But talking about going to other than dealing with the issue, Representative Dillon, Mitt Romney, during the presidential debate, he had a different suggestion on what the problem was with gun violence. Watch this.
We need moms and dads helping raise kids. Wherever possible, the benefit of having two parents in the home, and that's not always possible. A lot of great single moms, single dads. But gosh, to tell our kids that before they have babies, they ought to think about getting married to someone, that's a great idea. So we can make changes in the way our culture works to help bring people away from violence and give them opportunity. And
single-parent homes tell people to get married. I come out of a single-parent home. Anything other than to deal with the fact that you're selling magazines with 100 rounds of ammunition, you're closing mental health centers, blame it on broken homes.
Well, Reverend Sharpton, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there's an opportunity to have a reasonable discussion about this issue that respects the rights of those who want to keep and bear arms, respects the Second Amendment, but doesn't jump to the illogical conclusion that the solution is to have more guns on the street or to blame single-parent homes or to assume that if we just turn our heads, the problem's going to go away. We need to actually focus on a broad range of solutions to this problem, not try to scapegoat people or pigeonhole people that make sound bites and don't really offer any real solutions.
Michigan State Representative Dillon, Dana Milbank, thank you. Michelle Cottle, thank you for your time tonight.